It's go time on another edition of the Eye on Life podcast. I am your host, Brian Boyer. Thanks for taking some of the time of your day to join the show. And today we have a very exciting show. For me, it'll be personally a very challenging show because it will show how incompetent I am on a couple aspects of life that are very important. But hopefully, I know we're not going to have a therapy session today, but it may turn into that. Who knows? A couple of things I want to address before we get to our special guest today. I've gotten a couple questions over the past couple weeks since we started the podcast, and as I mentioned at the very beginning in the intro show, I am happy to answer pretty much any question. We're trying to stay away from politics and religion, but who knows? I mean, it's kind of a no holds barred, so we'll see where we go. One question that I received was about my attire on the show. So the black shirt. I will acknowledge the black shirt. So first off, it is so far it has been a different black shirt on every show. Okay, so I don't want anyone to think that I'm re-wearing this thing. I'm not washing it. That it's going to get off me and walk away because it's so filthy. That is not the case. It just happens to be my podcast uniform. On our last show, we had Mike Cassia talking about music. He was able to pull off the musicians are able to pull off the black shirt much better than I am, but I'm giving it a shot. Okay, it's a black shirt. If you want me to wear pink, if you want me to wear turquoise, email me. My email is brian@eyeonlifepodcast.com. If there's another shirt you want me to wear, I'm happy. It's not necessarily that I'm intentionally wearing the black. It's just it's black. It's neutral. Okay, so I'm not a fashionista, whatever it is. Okay, so that's the attire thing. So anybody who's wondering if it's the same shirt every time, it's not. In fact, I've had a couple of collared shirts on there. I'm trying to mix it up a little bit, but it's not the same black shirt. Okay, I'm not a pig. I'm into personal hygiene. I wash my clothes. Contrary to what many people think about men in society, some of us do wash our clothes. I wash my clothes. I dry my clothes. I can't say I always put them away, but I do at least wash them. Okay, so that's part of it. The other question that I received today or recently was, and I'm going to get to our guest. I'm going to ask her this question. Everyone knows that I have this thing on the show about the band Nickelback. We covered it last week on our show about music, and everybody knows that when we had our show about the culture of fitness facilities, that I went on a little bit of a rant about men jogging in public with no shirts on. It's a pet peeve of mine. I find it completely unacceptable. So someone asked me, and I think it was maybe mocking me a little bit, but I will answer the question seriously. So Chad Kroeger is the lead singer of the band Nickelback. And Wendy, who's our guest, are you familiar? You're obviously familiar with the band Nickelback.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to put any pressure on you to see if you've listened to the show yet, but I have a movement because the hate that this band receives from the public is mind-boggling to me. And it bothers me. I don't know why, but it bothers me. And so someone asked me, would it be okay if Chad Kroeger, the lead singer of Nickelback, jogged down the street without a shirt on? And because people know that I have a passion, and I'm very much against the no shirt wearing for men and women too, but women don't do it. We talked about that. But would I make an exception for Chad Kroeger, the rock star for the band Nickelback? No. Okay. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Chad Kroeger. I don't care if it's somebody that has the tightest six-pack you've ever had. The answer is no. So I'm answering that question. Chad Kroeger, Nickelback, I have a movement, but no, I don't want anyone famous, not famous, buff, not buff, I want everyone wearing a shirt when they're jogging down the street. That's it. Okay, I'm not wavering on that. We might get to a point where if somebody wants to bet me something, if we want to make a friendly bet, and if I lose, I have to run down, a public street with no shirt on at the risk of getting laughed at and mocked and shamed and arrested, I might do that. If somebody wants to challenge me, bring it on. But no, Chad Kroeger from the band Nickelback should not go out in public without a shirt. So I want to ask you a question, Wendy, our guest today. So Wendy Haggerty, who is a sex and love therapist, and things have changed since the days of Dr. Ruth. So we're gonna get into that a little bit. I want to know if she's your idol, because she's still my idol after all these years, Dr. Ruth. Yeah. Two things I want to ask you. First off, is it acceptable for men to be running down the street? And we're talking about sex and love. I don't love it, and I don't find it sexy. Is it acceptable for men to be running around 2 or 3 miles with no shirt on? From a therapy standpoint, does it bother you?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of find it curious how much it bothers you, and I really
It really
wonder
does. I
where
mean,
that comes from,
uh,
right? So I remember years ago, I went into a fitness facility, a big one located in Connecticut. I won't name it. And I took a tour and I really liked this fitness facility. I thought, oh, yeah, they have good classes, they have good equipment. I could see myself working out here. I was about to sign up for their membership. And the woman said, oh, we have a dress code. And I had a tank top on. It was
by the
fit.
way, completely acceptable, by the way,
Okay,
for
thank
men
you.
and women.
Okay. So, not there. That wasn't okay there. This particular health club at that time may have changed. It was a good decade plus ago. Required short sleeve shirts. Okay, no tank tops. And I thought, there is no freaking way I am going to work out feeling restrained.
Sure.
Now, I had been living years in San Diego prior to that. I'm a Connecticut girl, but I got away and really enjoyed California living. Everybody wears tank tops out there. Now I'm in Florida. Everybody wears tank tops. In fact, I'm usually in a tank top. I put on a nicer shirt for you guys today. Now I know the dress code. Maybe next time I'll wear
Just don't wear a black tank top, then we'll be twins, like I was with some of my other guests.
Right.
Well, so go ahead about that, because I find that curious that they were not allowed tank tops in a gym.
Okay, so that was just the deal, right? At the time, they felt it would be a distraction. They felt like the others wouldn't appreciate the bare arm tank top look. Okay, so what I felt it did is it just restricted my freedom to move in the way that my body likes to move without restriction. So I'll bring it back to your, idea that it bothers you or people with men who choose to not wear a shirt during their run. I'm not a man and I don't have the privilege of going shirtless. That would be kind of difficult with a female body.
Yes.
If I did, and I liked the feel on my skin and the movement that was unrestrained, and I was not, my intention was to enjoy my workout in nature for me with attire that would resemble what someone at the beach would have on, right? So it's certainly not illegal for a man to be shirtless.
It should be, just for the record. It should be.
Oh my goodness.
It absolutely should be. And I know you're analyzing this because we're going to get into Wendy's background here in a second. You're going to see why I may have deeper issues than I thought I did. But it's really, and I mentioned on one of the other, when I went on my rant, and I'm not going to go on another rant about this, but it's not, I was very clear. I'm not insecure about it. It's not a sexual thing for me. I'm a heterosexual male, but I appreciate men. I can say if a man is good looking. I have no issue with that. I just don't like it. There's something about it that just bothers me, and I will not waver on that. And it should be illegal. There should be an ordinance against it. Okay. And there might be some exceptions here and there. One of our gym guys said that, if you have health, a health thing or something like that. But there are shirts that are now made for runners to feel less restricted. They're like breathable shirts. If you chafe, you can, there are shirts for chafing. You can put Vaseline on your nipples if you want. There's no reason for it. That's all I'm saying. And I am overreacting. We've already established the fact that I am overreacting, but it's a thing. So my other question, go ahead. I want to
comment on that. Your belief is not going to change. Okay. I could give you all kinds of rationale for the other perspective or a different perspective, and your belief is not going to change. So, and we see that in the greater landscape of what is going on right now, crystal clear, not to get into politics, but people have very strong belief patterns. They are very instilled, and they will not change for the most part. There's not a lot of opening when someone feels that strongly about a topic.
I will tell you this right now, though, because the last thing I want people who watch the show or listen to the show to think is that I am a closed-minded person. I am not. So if someone, and I don't want to, we could spend, I already asked you to come on the show again because I want to just tell everyone here with the topic of love and sex, we're not getting through this in 30 to 45 minutes to an hour. Okay. We're just not. So we will have Wendy back on again because I have a lot more questions than what we can get through. Okay. But if anybody has a compelling argument, if there's a legitimate compelling argument for not wearing a shirt in public, I will listen to it. If you want to get into a debate with me about it, I will get into a debate, but it will have to be pretty compelling. Like life or death kind of compelling is what I'm saying.
And I'm going to say one more thing. I would just want to flip the question. What's the compelling argument why someone could not choose that? Why take someone else's personal freedom for what purpose? So I would flip it and say, can you please defend that position versus the other way around? And we don't have to go there, but that's just, my perspective.
I appreciate that. And I did talk about this a little bit in one of the last shows, so I won't harp on it, but I will answer it out of respect for you because you've taken the time to be with me today. Decorum. Okay, decorum. I mean, as I said, if we start taking our shirts off when we're jogging, where will it ever end? Are we going to start going to restaurants? Am I going to start going to a restaurant and let's just take off our shirts in the restaurant? Am I going to all these public places, which I know now is challenging with COVID and everything like that? Once COVID ends, I was cooped up for 6 months. I'm just going to walk down the street. I'm going to be in downtown, wherever, San Diego, Sarasota, West Hartford, right? Saratoga Springs. Just going to walk around with no shirt on. It's not illegal. Where does it end? Where's our decorum? Where is our sense of, leaving something to the imagination? And I'm not really that conservative. I don't like it. It bothers me. And again, I probably need serious help for it. People, I'm adjusting the microphone so people can actually see I'm talking into a microphone here. The other question I want to ask you is, I mentioned Chad Kroeger, who is the lead singer of Nickelback. And I'm not going to get into the fact whether you like Nickelback or not. You can offer that up. They're a band that's either loved or hated. There's really nothing in between. But what is the allure of rock stars, men and women? I mean, what is it that, I have a lot of female friends and they'll always say, oh, so-and-so is so hot. And I'm really wondering that if they saw that person just walking down the street, would they really think they were hot? Or is it just the fact that they are a musician, a rock star? And it goes both ways. Again, when Dolores O'Riordan was alive, her voice was just so incredible to me, from the Cranberries. Haley Williams, I think she's adorable, from Paramore.
Yeah.
And but I don't understand why somebody automatically sees Justin Timberlake and says, oh, he's so hot. I don't think that he or John Mayer, they're not bad looking guys, but if they were just walking down the street, why is there such a sexual attraction? Is it the music thing? Is that what it is? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think that anyone in the public eye that does, presents themselves confidently and with, some talent, of course, they are admired, esteemed. We look at that. And so an average, say, looking person, but, looks are very individualized anyway, what people like. So those people, just like movie stars, certain politicians, certain people, will be held in higher esteem and will be kind of admired and wanted, perhaps, for their charisma, confidence.
Okay, that's fair. That's a fair answer. Again, I don't have an issue with it. I think I'm just curious because there are some very, and I won't go into any names. I have them in my head. I will not go into names at this point, maybe as we get onto the show here. But there's some famous people who are not attractive. And that's not the point. I'm not trying to shame somebody for not being attractive. It is what it is. Okay. I'm not sitting here saying I'm this Adonis. Okay. What I am saying is that I just don't understand why I'm sitting in a place and somebody says, oh, this country singer, oh, he's so hot. I feel compelled to call him by his first name, even though I've never met him. And he's just so hot. I don't get it. It's just, I don't know. I don't understand that, but there's a lot I don't understand.
There's something to that, though, in our senses when we experience music. That auditory sense creates often in people a feeling, and we get attached to those feelings. We in our system, we sort of light up when we're having certain feelings, right? And so we can make an attachment to someone who produces that song, who therefore gives us those feelings. Make sense?
I'm taking up the guitar then. That's all there is to it. I'm taking up the damn guitar. It is interesting how we do tend to gravitate to that. And you're right. It's not just music. It's Hollywood. It's, I'm still waiting for the day that an engineer makes a great speech about something, and now all of a sudden he or she is looked at like, oh, look at that engineer. He or she is so sexy. And that's important work. But anyway, I won't dwell on that either. I was just curious. Do you like Nickelback, by the way? Are you a Nickelback fan?
I do. I'm more of a female vocalist.
Okay.
I just love my Fleetwood Mac, and I'm addicted to Lady A, So,
Awesome.
that's where I go. But
We'll cover more music on the next show. It's people who know me, who know the show, they know I'm passionate about music and sports, so I always weave that in somehow. But let's get to you for a little bit, Wendy. So Wendy Haggerty, who is a sex and love therapist, and you're based in Sarasota, Florida now. Formerly a Connecticut, you said Connecticut, I'll say woman, you said girl, Connecticut woman. And actually West Hartford, who lived right in the same neighborhood as I did. Our kids were in the same school together, but they were not the same age, so they never crossed paths, or they may have. But really happy to have you on the show. Really thrilled to have you here. You said you lived in San Diego as well. And so sex and love, okay, so there's a lot going on there. And I want to ask you, just to tell our listeners, how you got into this, because, the Eye on Life podcast is about bringing people together. It's a podcast for the people. It's about talking about things that were, again, casual conversations we're having on a daily basis. I don't care what your political beliefs are, what your religious beliefs are, what any of your beliefs are. If you like someone, you hate someone. We all know that love and relationships and sex are all in our minds pretty much 24/7 in one way or another. So how did you get into doing this for a living?
So you referenced Dr. Ruth earlier, and yes, she was an inspiration. I was a teenager in the 80s. I just had a birthday, by the way, and I'm in my last year of my 40s.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I was going to say 35, by the way, at the
Yeah.
most. I mean, I was aiming high there, but
So, yeah, Dr. Ruth and her story and her guts to just put it out there. I mean, she's just a tremendous inspiration to me. And I was also, as a young person, a little bit different. My friends were reading books like Nancy Drew, maybe Judy Blume. And the first book I ever read start to finish was Sybil. You may never have heard of Sybil.
it sounds familiar, but I don't think it was ever on my reading list.
Right.
But I have heard of it.
It's a heavy book, and
Okay.
it's a really deep, kind of dark book about a woman who experienced tremendous abuse from her mother in her youth, and she had multiple personalities as a result. It was heavy, and that was me. I didn't do small talk or light talk. I was the one who, in a group of people, would just ask that really uncomfortable question or steer conversations into something that I found interesting. Right. So I had this way, and people would always say, God, you're just so comfortable talking about this stuff. And I was also very comfortable in myself as a young person. I credit my mom and my parents for that, just their style. It was a very loving and very open and free and communicative home style. And so I'm thankful for that. And I had an interest, so a really young interest in my work today. However, I recognize that as a young person, I had a lot to learn. And I didn't think anyone would take me as a young version of me serious at all if I was trying to discuss these topics in a therapy style setting without having gone through a bit of life myself. So I went to college at Syracuse. I got my major was communications, minor was psych. Good background for that. But instead of going down my master's right away or doctorate, I pursued the kind of the communication side of things. And I was in marketing for about 15 years in total. So my first career was kind of neat too. I worked for Lego for many years. I opened Legoland, California. That's how I got out to San Diego, which was fantastic. When I was out in San Diego, I was back at Toy Fair in New York, which is an industry show. Came to Connecticut, went out with friends, and I met my then husband, or ex-husband now, Steve. And so Steve and I met, we dated long distance for not too long. I was 32, he was the same, recently divorced from a first marriage, and he had 2 young kiddos. And we just had a really romantic, like long distance thing, and then sort of said, are we gonna do this? And agreed, and the doing this meant leave San Diego, come back to Connecticut to co-parent with him and his ex. So that's what got me to Connecticut, back to Connecticut, West Hartford in particular. And now Anna and Alex, my two older stepkids, are both in college, and we have twins that are 12, almost 13. So a bit about that. And then, so I was still in marketing. I ended up getting a job as the marketing director at West Farms Mall, for anyone in Connecticut that knows that wonderful mall, with wonderful people that I work with, and I loved it. And I was getting into my mid-30s, wanting to have children. Steve and I had decided we were going to have children in addition to Anna and Alex. And so I was having a little difficulty with that. My work schedule was intense. And so I pulled back. I actually let go of the job and focused on trying to get pregnant. Struggled to share, because this is kind of just an important part of my story, and it helps me with my work. We were not having success getting pregnant. So we sought out assistance, and I can credit UConn Fertility Center for my twins. Very, very thankful for that. So that was an interesting ride. And during that process, there were a lot of transitions that happened that affected the romantic relationship and life that I shared with Steve. So I was doing my own growth, needing something for me, and said, you know what, I need to go back to this. I need to go back to this sort of early interest. This part of my life right now is hard, and I need to do my best to understand it. So there was like this sort of personal want, along with a really strong interest to, go towards that profession and land there. And so I worked on a master's at the, after that I worked on a specialty. So I have a license in marriage and family therapy and a specialty in sex therapy. And I got into my work finally after all my education in 2012. So I've been loving it ever since, and that's how I got in.
I'm sure these days business is good for you. With it's very complex, and I appreciate you sharing some of the personal items that you've gone through. That's compelling, and obviously going through some of that, I'm sure probably helps you when you're talking to others through some of this process. I want to go back to what you were saying about Dr. Ruth. Yeah. And this is I don't remember. I'm trying to remember how old I was, but I remember when Dr. Ruth was on TV, and literally my friends, and again, this was not high school. I was a little more mature in high school. I was younger, but I remember watching the Dr. Ruth show just to hear her say the words penis and vagina, so we could laugh at that.
Yes.
And that's actually, and I don't know why. I mean, again, we're younger, obviously. We're not older. Apparently, those words were funny to my friends and I. We're boys. We're not that much more mature as we get older, right? But I do remember watching that show, and just but the fact is that those are okay. So those are acceptable scientific terms, penis and vagina, right? And we were sitting there laughing at them. So, as we get older, sex always, I don't know if it's how you're raised or it's society or media, but it almost becomes taboo. And I'm not even talking about all of the tentacles that go along with sex, some of the things that maybe are considered to be legitimately taboo. I'm just talking about sex in general. Why do we get so uncomfortable around that? Again, from an early age, I'm sitting there laughing at penis and vagina. Even now you hear in a movie, my kid, they're laughing. I have two boys, they're laughing at those words. And so if they're laughing at those words, when other topics or other terms are brought to the forefront, there's even more of a discomfort, a nervous laugh, a humorous laugh. Why is that? Why is sex considered to be uncomfortable, personal? I mean, I understand why personal and almost taboo sometimes.
Right. I think it says so much about our families and culture that our kids and ourselves, how we were raised, right? So if we're hearing those words for the first time, as you suggested you did on the Dr. Ruth show, how sad that was the first time, or one of the first times that those words, that language was used. It wasn't normalized for you. It wasn't part of your very early experience, right? So now I can say in my house, I have boy-girl twins. There's something really unique about that setup, right? So they were together in the womb, together at birth, and they spent many years in their early life normalizing the differences in their bodies, because they would bathe together, be naked together, whatever as young kids do. And in my house, with my training, beliefs, whatnot, those words were as common as any other words. My kids don't laugh at those words. They don't think they're funny at all. They think they're just normal words that explain body parts. That's not what most kids, families, and culture and religion or whatever all of our inputs are. That's not the lessons we're getting. And so when we hear them on the outside, mind you, at the same time, we have this greater culture that's very sexualized. I mean, we see imagery, we see things on TV, we're protecting our kids by, trying to not let them see things, but we have all kinds of technology now. I mean, the average age for kids stumbling on porn, if you will, is age 12. So if we're not talking to our kids about all of this as our families and normalizing it, when they do hear it, and they hear, whether it's language or other interesting things about human bodies and sexuality, then it is going to be intriguing. It's going to be a little weird and uncomfortable.
So that's a question I have, actually, because there's a balance, and we'll talk about a couple of things today, because we have a very diverse group of listeners. Some have kids, some don't, some are married, some are not, dating, and I want to cover as much of that today as we can. But when it comes to children, and I've always been fairly liberal as far with kids, not DCF kind of, call DCF liberal, that kind of thing, inappropriate liberal. But I always sort of feel like, even people that I've grown up with, and there's always that one person, and I knew a bunch of I grew up in upstate New York, so I know a lot of people that went to Syracuse, and that one person. It's not just Syracuse; it's every school. You're there that first week, and that person ends up in the hospital because they had alcohol poisoning, because they were so fascinated about what that might be like, and their parents were so strict, and they never hung out with kids, and they never drank in high school. And I get that 21's the legal limit, but at what point for kids, and I don't know if it's a specific age or it's a maturity thing, at what age can and should kids be exposed to sexual topics? And I mean appropriate. I'm not saying you're sitting down with your 10-year-old and watching pornography. I'm not saying that.
Right. So
what I'm really more asking is, how much should we be protecting them from a risque part of a movie or a talk that you're having with your significant other? Where's that line drawn?
Right. So what I want to just honor in the conversation is any, sort of attitudes and values and beliefs that, families and people carry that they want to pass down to their children. They are a great way, they have the privilege to do that, but they have to have the conversations, right? So let's say we're talking about with our, maybe young teens or preteens about the decisions about sex, what sex is, what it means. If families have, values about that, and they're having the conversation, and they're having it in a manner that is sort of respectful and understanding and factual, maybe not sex negative, full of fear and sometimes mistruths. Like, let's have a nice, balanced conversation, hopefully. And then they have more of an opportunity to, share those values and have it be meaningful, and have your children believe you are a good source of information, right? You're going to be, a good source, because they're going to hear the messages. They're going to hear all kinds of messages. I've had some really interesting experiences just in the last 2 weeks with my 12-year-olds that blew my mind. And I have, such an open way of thinking and dealing with this. And it still blew my mind what happened to each of them in different ways, right? So my 12-year-old daughter was part of a group text where a boy sent at age 12 a full nude and asked the 5 other girls in the group chat for a nude. So that was a really interesting one to work through, right? That happens. That doesn't happen because of bad parenting. That just happens,
Sure,
right?
That does happen. Yeah.
And my son had another really interesting one when he brought up the topic of abortion, which wasn't one that I had discussed with him yet, but he had learned about it from kids at school, and he had a really interesting perspective, and we had a nice conversation, but they are exposed. I don't know that we can or should protect. I think we need to be right there with them. So I don't have specific ages in mind when I say this stuff. I think as parents, you open the conversation and you make it comfortable for the questions that they might have to come forward, and you meet them where they're at. But there's a really great video. Anyone listening that has young kids, there's a video that was made over in Europe, but it's been translated. It's from a book. I think it's a Swedish book or something, but it's called The True Story of How Babies Are Made. And it's factual. It's done with cartoony kind of people, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. It is a little heteronormative, but if that's your family style and you want to share that, it's a really great way. So there are some wonderful sex ed materials that families can access to have those conversations.
And you brought up a good point before. Listen, anybody who's listening to the show or not listening to the show, everyone has their own value system, and we're not. I want to be very, very clear here that we're not sitting here preaching on anything. We're having an informative conversation. Wendy and I we next time you're up here in West Hartford, we go over to the center in West Hartford and have a drink and talk about this. That's kind of what we're doing here. So everybody has to do what you feel comfortable with. That's kind of I guess that's my disclaimer. And we could the whole thing about kids is scary these days. And that's a whole separate show, probably a separate topic, because I've heard horror stories and it scares me. I have boys, but I'm still scared. I mean, I think I'd be probably even more, petrified if I had daughters, but I guarantee, well, I shouldn't say I guarantee, I've never been part of this. Obviously growing up, it was not an issue for me because there wasn't the technology, but, we talked about, using the correct terms, and my friends and I laughing at Dr. Ruth saying penis and vagina, right? Well, I'm fairly certain, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when these guys are talking to their friends, right, in the locker room or at school, they're probably not saying penis and vagina. They're probably saying things that are much more crude than that. So have the conversation if you're comfortable with it, and normalize it, I guess. But I want to get to the adults. Kind of let's start talking a little bit about the adults here, because the kids are, whenever you're listening to the show, the kids are hopefully in bed by now. If they have their phone with them, they'll go check on them, because we want to make sure that they're not looking at something they shouldn't be looking at. When it comes to relationships, and there's so much involved with this question. It's a big question. And again, we only have a little bit. We don't have that much time, but we'll continue this conversation on a later show. But when it comes to intimacy and relationships, how closely are the two tied? I think I know the answer, but I want to pretend. But I have friends that are married. I have friends that are divorced. I have friends happily married, separated, miserable in their marriages, and not even that, just in relationships in general, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Does the intimacy piece have to be good? I don't want to say electric. Does it have to be good for the relationship to succeed? Sustainable, to make it sustainable.
Right. So Brian, you used the word intimacy, and I'm really glad you used that word, because to me that's a big umbrella term, and within that might include sexuality, right? But there are so many other forms of intimacy that are so valid and very, very important to people. So why we connect with the people we connect to, just from a anthropological standpoint, I mean, we are using our sense of smell to determine good mating partners. That's to produce good genetic offspring. If we're using it appropriately, there's some protection in that. So females are not attracted to people from their same families. So there's interesting things that come into play why we choose who we choose to be in relationship with. When we form our relationship, we are coming in with everything that we've had thus far in life, right? So that includes very early childhood experience, even first year experiences with attachment. So many people come into their adult relationships with some wounds from years prior. Insecure attachment styles that may include some anxiety or even avoidance. And they use their adult relationships to resolve some of those things in their life. So the growth that happens in relationship is tremendous. Anyone who does marriage and long-term relationships is helping themselves. They're helping themselves to grow a whole lot more than someone who doesn't go there, or stays just for a bit, in that really early phase when it's sort of super easy and not that deep yet. And then they deck out. So the the reasons people are in their relationship are broad. In the work I do, most of the people will come into marital therapy with a focus on sexuality and intimacy because they'd like to either, sort of fix what they deem as a problem or normalize their experiences or grow in some way. And the couples that do build that, strengthen that, fix that, if you will, have something that other couples may not have. So it is bonding. It is something that is usually, if you're in a traditional monogamy style relationship, that usually sexual intimacy is, at least, is usually kept within the relationship. So you're giving something kind of precious to your partner. Your ability to have partner intimacy and sexual intimacy, right? By choosing them. And so to sort of put it higher, elevate it in the level of importance is great. And I help couples do that at the level that makes sense to them. We have plenty of non-sexual couples. About a third of all long-term couples and marrieds are non-sexual.
Okay, that baffles me a little bit. So when you say non-sexual, that's nothing. That's like nothing sexual. That's not just.
So in the way we do our research in sex therapy, it's less than one time a month is usually considered a non-sexual relationship. So it's not with any kind of regularity and consistency.
So those can survive.
Oh,
they do survive. They can survive and thrive, even if you're married or you're dating someone exclusively, and you're not having a ton of sex. Forget the intimacy thing. Forget holding hands in public. Forget cuddling while watching Netflix.
Right.
I'm talking about the sex, right?
Right.
You're saying that they can still thrive and sustain their relationship, even if there's it's very infrequent.
So thriving is when two people agree on their marriage or relationship as being good and satisfying, and what works for any one person or partners is unique to them, right? So what gets difficult, and when therapy usually comes into play, is when maybe one or the other, maybe both, but sometimes it's one sort of, pushing it along, is saying, this isn't quite good enough. I want to grow. I want some freedom to grow, to explore, to, enhance my skills, to try some new things and build that novelty piece back in that was there in the beginning, but of course over time goes. So, that desire difference, when it gets significant, then there's an issue that couples need to resolve. It's not necessarily a issue with a high desire person that should not be high desire, or a low desire person that should not be low, but together in relationship, there's a problem. Make sense?
It does make sense. So there has to be, it almost sounds like there has to be an agreement, kind of. When I say not a formal agreement, but almost a mentality. Yes. That, this is something that's important, or this frequency is, because I think it appears, and you're the expert again, but it appears that there are a lot of people out there who are very frustrated, sexually frustrated. And, you talk to couples, and again, you talk to them clinically. For me, it's, having a bourbon at a bar, talking to a buddy of mine. So I don't even want to go down what that conversation sounds like. But the reality is that, there are a lot of people that seem to be sexually frustrated. Is that accurate? Are people generally, and again, I'm not necessarily looking for statistics here, although if you have them, that's great, but are people generally satisfied? And that kind of goes to my other question too, monogamy, right? Okay. All for monogamy, but it just seems in this day and age, it almost seems, and I'll probably get hate mail for this, it almost seems archaic to say that, to talk about monogamy. But is that still even a thing? Do people actually do that?
Yeah. So, okay, let me piece this one out, right?
I know there's a lot there.
I guess I'll start with the monogamy piece because that's fun. Yes, monogamy is live and well, and people who can feel like they have some form of a choice in it, like there's a thing called choice monogamy, right? That feels really good. So if two people can make an agreement that this is the style that they feel is right for them in relationship, and it works, and they, perhaps do all kinds of wonderful things to keep that going nicely, or not, but they're okay, right? Sure. It can absolutely work, and there's a lot of good reasons why that still is very, helpful in society for couples to form monogamous style relationships. There are plenty of couples that identify under another term we use now called monogamish. Have you heard that one? Monogamish.
I have not actually heard that, but I'm curious as to what that means. I have an idea. Ish. There are a lot of issues out there right now because there's so many uncertainties in the world. But what's a monogamish?
Yeah, the ish can be so many things. It can be, hey, we're only physically together, but we might fantasize individually or together about the other, because that sparks some novelty in the brain, which our brains like, or we might, have a way of being able to be flirty with, friends, couples, or other people that, gives us a little energy, and then we bring it home, right? So the ish can be all kinds of things, all the way to one end, far end of the spectrum of open lifestyle. But there are plenty of couples, and they are going back to their agreements, or in therapy, we're talking about making what was implied in your marital or relational contract, if you will, even though you never really probably talked about it, what was implied, make it explicit, talk it out. And you know what, talk it out like every month or so, because especially for long-term couples, we're changing, we're growing, we all are individuals, right? So how do you know what worked back at one point is still working for you today if you're not communicating? So all those frustrated people that you reference, and I'm sure you do hear plenty, they're maybe not taking the risks that they would need to take in order to communicate about such hard stuff to communicate about, right? This is a tough area to address.
It's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. Don't worry if you're listening or watching Eye on Life podcast, you are not having technical glitches. I am wearing glasses, and yes, we are actually cutting this episode into two halves. We're talking about sex, relationships, and intimacy with sex and love expert Wendy Haggerty, and we have a lot that we've covered already. I hope you enjoyed the first half. If you enjoyed the first half, you'll definitely want to join us for the second segment of the show, which will be next week. We'll cover some great topics, some touchy topics that you'll definitely want to hear from Wendy on. For example, we will cover what constitutes cheating. It may not be what you think. The other item is, should you have the conversation with your significant other about how many sexual partners they've had before you? Think about that. You really want to have that conversation, and if you don't want the answer, don't answer the question. We'll dive into that a little bit more. And finally, if there is something that you enjoy from an intimacy standpoint and your partner does not like it and will not do it, is that a deal breaker? Wendy is going to let us know the questions that have been asked for many generations, and we will give you the answers in the next Eye on Life podcast. Follow, like, and email me if you have any questions. Brian@eyeonlifepodcast.com. Thanks. Goodbye.